Welcome back, friends, to the shop. April 1st, 2019, and I turned 50 today. So people have asked me, so how do you feel to be 50? And I'm going to have to claim my granddad's response when we would ask him. And he would say, well, I feel the same as I felt yesterday. So I kind of feel that same way. No big deal. I've always kind of thought that after 30, birthdays are for kids anyway. So today, being the spring is upon us, it is a time we're going to need to do some work and look after our tools that have wooden handles. So you're going to be using your diggers, you're going to be using your post hole deals, your hoes and your rakes for gardening and all those things. Now is a great time. So unless you have more money than Croesus, you want to look after your tools, and I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to make these wood handles last for years and years. These old tools are so interesting to me and how they came about. What's really interesting is when you look at tools that are specific to different regions. Axes, for example, you can look at axes and you can almost tell what part of the country they came from. But I'll share an interesting story with you about the Great Depression that I learned years ago. I always associate the Great Depression with Oklahoma because that's where I'm tightening that, righty-tighty, lefty-loose, because that's where my family came from. And they, of course, my grandparents, when they were no longer able to make a living on their homestead, they all packed up in their cars and headed to Idaho for work. A lot of people from Oklahoma and the Midwest went to California and to the East Coast because they were so desperate. But what was interesting, what I've learned in reading, is that there were some guys that that were single, maybe bachelors, that headed across the country. They didn't have any money or vehicle or anything. They were so poor, and they figured, well, we'll just work our way across the country and we'll get work where we can, and I'll walk or hitch rides or ride the hitch on the train, whatever, kind of that whole hobo movement deal. But the one tool that they took with them when a guy really got serious and you had to think, what is going to make me, what's going to help me to feed myself, to provide for myself. If I need to work, I can do the greatest amount of work, and that was the garden hoe, just a standard hoe. You could show up on someone's house, am I tightening that again? Good grief. And maybe you'd go split wood or use their axe, but if you had a hoe, you could work. You could hoe weeds. This is, of course, way before Monsanto and chemicals and all of that. So, all of that work was all hand done. Mrs. Wranglerstar, for example, when she was, her summer work was detasseling corn, which they still do by hand in the Midwest. Well, she has fond memories of that. So let's take all this hardware out. Good hardware. This was American-made stuff. Is just better. Right tool for the right job. One of the reasons this digger is not working very good is this has been used a lot and it's all kind of mushroomed and actually misshapen at the bottom there. So we're going to do a couple things. This is if you want to straighten metal, this is an old body mandrel. You need something with some mass you can kind of put behind something, and then this is kind of the reason why you have a ball peen or a round end of your hammer. When you have to work on something or straighten something that's crooked, or that's got a radius in it, you use this end here. So we'll just use this as backing, and it doesn't take much, just tap that back in there where that got beat up. Now we're going to take a rat tail file or a half round file and take those lips off there. You don't want to, on your shovels or your hoes or anything like that, this will all need to be done the same way. You don't want to be able to feel any lip on that. Once you get that all free of lip, we'll flip it over. We'll have to do that on both sides. Now on the convex, excuse me, is this the convex? Yeah, the convex side, we're going to go to a flat file because we don't have that problem, that inside radius. This actually looks pretty good. Now on these blunt digging tools, you don't want to put much of an edge on them. Actually, a sharp edge is fragile, and you're going to be in the rocks and dirt. So you want a utility edge. So you want something that's not sharp like a knife, pointed like a knife, but really blunt, more like a chisel. So once I get that down there, you just take that and just smooth that out. This will go for your shovels as well. You just want a nice round, smoothed over, kind of a folded over edge that's going to stay sharper longer. And if you're digging a lot, make sure you have a file in your truck or in your toolkit. Keep those shovels sharpened. In the fire service, wildland firefighting, we wear shovels out because we file them all the time, keeping them sharp so you don't have to work so hard. Another problem we have here is you can see that this is held on with these rivets, and they're loose. There's nothing. Digging post holes is a terrible job. There's nothing worse than having to do it with a terrible tool that's all wiggly and loose. So we can tighten these up. Let's see if that tightened it up. And indeed it has. You can see here if I grab it with all my weight, it's tight now. There's no movement in there. Let's clean up this hardware here. We don't want to go to the trouble of making the nicest post hole digger in the county and put this grubby old hardware back. So the absolute best way to go about this is a bench grinder. Hardware cleans up really nice on the wire brush. Two shop tools a guy wants to get eventually is a bench grinder with a wire wheel on one side and a small drill press. Here, I've been working on these, but you can see the difference. So here's a kind of interesting thing. So here's a bad design. When you're, sometimes you do what you have to do. Of course, I understand that. I've done this many times myself. But you can see this through bolt here, which is a pivot for that deal, it should have a collar all the way down here. So see how there's a smooth surface here? This is a bearing surface. This, of course, every time you work and use the tool, this is rotating back and forth. Well, the threads start too far in, and so now we've run on the thread. So if we look at that closely, you can see how that's worn that all the way? And that causes it to be sloppy, the tool to be kind of wiggly, and just not the best way to do it. Ideally, we would have a different bolt, a specialty bolt that had a collar or shoulder, whatever you want to call that, all the way out, and then just the threads on the end. So just a little data point there for you when you're putting stuff together and trying to make selections on fasteners. Any tool you have with a wooden handle, once a year you're going to want to do this. If the handle's in really rough shape, I'm pretty much going to use a 150 grit for everything. A 150 grit, and get the varnish off if it's on there. It's going to take a little work, but once you get the varnish off, then the upkeep's pretty easy. So get the varnish off, but the best way I've found to sand these round handles is clamp them in the vise, and then you can use, I just use these sanding discs. I always have them around, and they're so tough. And then you can sand that off like this and get it nice and round. Avoid using a machine because you're going to get a lot of flat spots. It's hard to get it even, but this way here, it spreads, kind of spreads the pressure around, and you'll maintain the right shape. I wanted to show you real briefly just what a difference that sanding makes and just the feel of it. This is the old side with the varnish that's all kind of weather beaten and peeling. It's really awful. If you go out, if you have some neglected tools, you probably feel that it's kind of sharp on the hands and it just feels nasty versus this. And this isn't even treated yet, so that's what you can do just really quickly with that varnish. Even if you have some cracks, like this one handle here has. Because of neglect, there does have a little crack in there, but that's okay. If we keep treating that with a BLO, that will almost actually kind of start to heal itself in a way. I know it's strange, but it just kind of seems to do that. But I've got just uncomfortable ridges and bumps on here, and here it's just smooth as glass. So let's put some paint on these guys. We'll just use a good enamel. With that paint drying, we can get to the best part now. The boiled linseed oil on the tool handle. Oh, I always look forward to this. The sanding is always such a drudgery when you get to do this in it. I don't know, it's just something about it. The color of the dust of the wood, and especially after how it builds up after so many years of using it. Those old tools that you've put it on for 10 years are, boy, this is thirsty for. It's going to take a lot. I might have to really goop a little handhold here. It's super dry under that varnish. That's the problem with the that varnish, you know, that varnish or that poly that so many people put on wood floors. Look at that, just in that first foot there, that whole bit was taken up. It sits on top of the wood, those products, and the wood just continues to get drier and drier underneath of it. I mean, wood it's a living thing, just like leather, and it needs to what gives it its character, strength, and all that are the oils and all that stuff. So you need to in the minerals, you need to replenish that in the wood, just like you do with the leather, or it'll just get dry and crack. So that's something that's easy to neglect. Boy, that handle turned out nice. All right, let's see what we can do here. So got 4 coats of paint on there. We cleaned up our hardware. What a difference, huh? And it's easy to keep this stuff clean and looking nice if you do a couple things. If when you're done, you spray it off and then just hit it with like a ballistol or an oil or something, so you can, you know, actually, I just realized something I was going to explain to you. So we can improve upon this deal here. So the nuts, there weren't any washers right there, and so they tightened into the wood, and the wood is kind of spongy, and that's why those things are always working tight. So we'll add a couple washers. So we'll put this to the inside, that damaged area, and then we'll run our hardware through backwards. It shouldn't make any difference that I could see. Now we can flip this over. Blue Loctite on there. I don't have to worry about that coming loose, but we can add the washers here. Now you can see, and that is going to hold a lot better than what we had before. That black on that hickory looks so nice. That's way better with those washers on there. That's going to stay tight, no more wiggle, no loose rivets. All right, let's do the other side. When you put these back on, they're directional, meaning if you put it on this side of the tabs here, you know, it would be nice if this one was wider, but there is a bit of an offset. If you put it on this side of the tab, then it won't, these stops won't engage. Do you see right there? But this side they will. That's the way it's designed. So check that you have that done right, or it'll over close and pinch your fingers. So I'd have to say that looks a whole lot better, right? I'll tell you guys, there really is something to it. If you're working with tools that are well maintained and well taken care of, that you have some pride in, that are good quality, that goes into your work. When you're working with junk and with dirty stuff and stuff that doesn't work very good and it gets you frustrated, it just is the end result. So I like restoring stuff anyway, and what I find myself when you get in front of the computer, you know, you can sucks you in, and pretty soon you know you're sitting in front of the thing for 3 or 4 hours. I'll just come out here and grab something and you know, that needed work or restoring, and I enjoy it. You know, get my audiobooks and going through the classics still, audiobooks, and just listen along and do that. I really enjoy it. So one thing that's kind of fun, I'll give you a little, you know, maybe one in a million guys would ever do this, but I think it's really fun and it will earn you friends for life, is if you borrow something from a buddy. Let's take this for example. Let's say that, hey, you call your neighbor or your buddy, hey, can I borrow your fence post digger? And yeah, he goes and gets it, and it looked like mine did, you know, with all the mud caked on it and the cracked varnish handles and all that. And just for fun, you came out and you spent an hour and a half and you did, the whole treatment on here. And when you were done with it and you handed it back to him, it'd be interesting to see if he noticed. And it would be really interesting what his take would be on that. If that probably had never happened to him before, it'd blow his mind. And just think the amount of, you're passing on those, the golden rule, do unto others, and it's just a really subtle and nice reminder that the guy would never forget of how to treat things that are borrowed and such. So, perfect example. A guy last fall, asked to borrow my wood splitter. I didn't really know him. Actually, Mrs. W is better friends with his wife than I am with him. I know who he is. He's been out here before. Asked to borrow the wood splitter, and I said, yeah, no problem. So he takes the wood splitter and doesn't return it, and I called him back and hound him and back and forth. Finally, he brings it out and just dumps it like at the front gate. And then, and so I hook on, so then I have to go out in the rain and I hook onto it, and it's of course sitting out in the rain. Take it back into the shop, and it's out of gas. It's filthy, and when he took it, it was all pressure washed, clean, nice and tuned up and everything. The pole rope is broken. The engine is filthy. The wood splitter is filthy. It's never been greased. The tire needs air. It's not even the same machine. And my initial response to that it really made me angry. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? That's an education for me right there. First off, remember how you feel about that, how disrespected you feel, and never do that to anyone else. And you also know what type of a guy you're dealing with, right? And that's not a guy that I, to be quite honest, that's not a guy that I want a friendship with or anything to do with. It's just not the way I work, and I think it's shabby. Yeah. How was it? I'll finish with this. There's a story in the Old Testament. I think maybe it's in not Proverbs or King Solomon. Anyway, it doesn't matter. King Solomon, he says, I'm paraphrasing here. He goes, I'm walking along, and I look over, walking on the sidewalk, and I look over, and I see my neighbor's place, and I see that the fence is all broken down, and the weeds in the yard, and the shutters fallen off, and a broken window with cardboard on it. He says, I'm paraphrasing it. He says, I beheld and I received knowledge, or I received instruction. That's what it was. I looked at this, and I received instruction, and I just moved on. And I've always loved that so much. I love the fact that he didn't feel the need to be a busybody or to point his finger at anyone. Hey, man, why don't you fix that, mow your lawn? Why don't you do this and that? He just looked at it and thought to himself, yeah, I see a lot right there, and I see what I don't want to be and what I don't want to do. And it was enough for him just to like, okay, I get it. I know how not to live, and I know one better way to live. I beheld this, and I received instruction. I like that. Brought it in, right? Improved himself rather than trying to rebuke someone or tear someone else down. It's not your concern what he does with his garden. That's it. All right, here you go. The new post hole digger. Now I don't even want to use it. It looks so it looks so good. But thanks for watching. Thanks for all the well wishes, and we'll see you guys on the next video.